You are listening to Grab Them by the Pod, a member of the ACE Podcast Network. And at last, here we are once again at Grab Them by the Pod. I am Kevin along with Jesse. Thank you for joining us here at the show. We always talk politics. We always talk Trump. We've got all kinds of stuff to talk about to you tonight. So, Jesse, what do you have for us?
Well, I have to start off by saying we're probably going to be disappointing some of our listeners today because we are not going to be covering the recently announced Pentagon UFO program that they spent $20 million on and the head of which says he believes we are not alone. That's always fun, but we're not going into that. But we have some other fun things to talk about, although your mileage may vary on how fun it really is. The tax bill that just, it seems like it never ended. It seems like it might end today. Republicans are doing everything they can to get their final votes in by the end of this week, by the end of this year, to get their Republican tax cut bill passed. The House actually passed it today, but oops, they're going to have to re-vote on it. That's because the Senate parliamentarian ruled that provisions in the bill violated the rules governing the legislation. That's probably something you should look at before you actually vote on it. Those two provisions basically just don't comply with budget rules of reconciliation, which Republicans are using to avoid a Democratic filibuster. So basically one of them is tied to homeschooling expenses. The second one is concerned with an exemption that would allow universities with fewer than 500 tuition-paying students from having to pay the endowment excise tax. So those things are being taken out, and the House is going to revote today, and the Senate is probably voting possibly as we record this right now, if not now, sometime tonight in the wee early hours of the morning.
A college with fewer than 500 tuition-paying students.
That's
I don't know if that would be worth going to.
That's like having the University of Jesse and having it here. And hey, I'm accredited. I'll give you a stamp on a diploma and, go out and conquer. Go forth and conquer.
Dare we say Trump University?
No, I'm pretty sure that Jesse University is much more reputable than Trump University. No one's trying to sue me.
Yeah.
So as of this recording, the Senate has Rubio, they have Corker, they have Collins, they have Mike Lee. Anybody that may have caused a stink in the past or they weren't sure of, they're going to vote for it. And we've discussed this several times, but why not do it one more time, and this time with feeling? The tax plan's costs are going to exceed $2 trillion, that's with a T, over about a decade. When you factor in economic growth, most of these tax cuts for individuals are going to expire after 2025, so you may see some savings next year, but eventually you're not going to see those savings. You know who will? The corporations, because the corporate tax rate is permanent. And that's what we've been railing against. When the corporations are the ones seeing a permanent tax cut, and people like you and me are going to be, back to paying it up the nose before you know it, that's not popular. It's not good.
No, truly, read between the lines, folks. This is, once again, politicians, doing the dirty work to put things in their favor and in the favor of their donors, while the average American takes the biggest hit.
Yeah, and just to go into that a little bit, we've talked about this in the past again, that the Trump administration wants to pass this because they haven't accomplished anything. Everything that they've accomplished has been through executive orders, which that doesn't count. The president just signs a piece of paper and it's done. So they're passing a bill that's really bad. And I was reading an article today by a friend of the podcast, Harry Engine from 538. I love his song. He wrote an article about how unpopular it is. And it says 33% of Americans are in favor of this bill. 52% of Americans are opposed to it. That's a negative 19 percentage point split that makes this bill the least popular major tax bill since going back to 1981. That's not good. It's going to hurt you when you already have an interesting 2018 election coming up.
Well, and rightfully so. That 1981 tax bill under Ronald Reagan was the Economic Recovery Tax Act, or the ERTA for short. This was, supply side economics, benefiting businesses rather than consumers. It was the theory of trickle-down economics, that if you put money back into the hands of the business class, eventually they will create jobs and put more money in the pockets of the working class. But does that work? I would argue that we haven't really seen it successful in the last 35 years. And it might even be the thing that put us in some of the economic holes that we've been in the last 10 to 15.
I mean, the argument is they'll use that money to then buy get new employees, buy new things. But instead, they just put it in their bank and keep on going, along business as usual. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. So, this may be a policy win for them, but I don't think it's going to be a political win. And following what happened in Alabama, Virginia, New Jersey, the GOP really needs some political wins going forward into 2018. Just looking back at some of the people who may have some interesting votes on this bill, Senator Jeff Flake, he's not running again. He's the one who gave $100 to Doug Jones in Alabama. Right now, we don't know whether he's going to vote. He hasn't committed either way on that. But he actually yesterday, and we'll get into this in a little bit, tweeted his support still for Mueller, which is not a popular thing for Republicans to do. So who knows what Flake will do. Probably won't matter in the long run, but worth keeping an eye on. Senator John McCain actually is going to miss the vote because he's still in Arizona recovering from some medical treatments he received due to his brain tumor. And then there's Thad Cochran, who's a Republican from Mississippi. He missed votes last week due to health issues, but he's expected to be there today. So, it doesn't matter if these guys don't show up or not. They haven't seated Doug Jones yet. They have the votes, even if it were to be like a tie of like 49-49 somehow, or some weird thing with people not showing up. You still have Mike Pence to break the vote. So I think it's time to face facts. We were successful in not passing the health care legislation, but this tax bill is going to go through.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does look that way, Jesse. But, funny you should mention Senator McCain, because according to a CNN poll conducted by survey and market research firm SSRS, which came out today, Senator McCain is more popular with Democrats and independents than members of his own Republican Party, with 68% of Democrats in this country favoring him, as opposed to only 46% Republicans. So some of those actions he's taken on those previous bills this year have put him more in favor of the Democratic Party, with Republicans questioning his loyalty to party. But of course, it did seem as if he was coming around on this tax bill, and nonetheless, he won't even be there for this vote as he tends to his health back home in Arizona.
Well, as a former college professor, I would say, McCain was a maverick.
He's a maverick.
Although he sometimes picks and chooses when he's a maverick. The people that are going to be really happy with this are going to be the people who are going to be giving the GOP lots of money next year in 2018. Their donors, who are people who have lots of money, are very happy with this bill. So, on the upside, we won't talk about this bill anymore likely after today. But it's not the end of the world, but it's just not a good bill. They're passing them to pass something that's never good legislation. So we can't win them all, but we tried, I think, right? We can say we tried.
We did, that's for sure. We gave it the good fight, and alas, this is what we're left with. So again, these things, as Congress changes, so do laws. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen. Of course, we have the midterm elections coming up in less than a year now. So how might that change any policies that are made by this Congress? We shall see.
And it's important to know, we don't dislike this because it's a Republican bill. We dislike it because it's bad for the average American citizen. That's how we look at everything. And yes, we've been railing against Trump, and we will continue to rail against Trump a lot in this podcast, but it's not because he has an R next to it. It's his name. It just so happens that right now the people with the R's next to their name are doing things that are better for themselves and for their supporters than they are the average American voter.
They certainly do themselves no favors in gaining support from the average middle-class working American. And with a bill like this, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah. And on top of all of this, Fox News and a lot of the right media and just people working in the right have really gone to war against Bob Mueller. Maybe they sense the end is near, or they're just worried what's going on. I've heard there's still another year left possibly in Mueller's investigation, but or maybe they're just doing everything they can to discredit the guy. It's just so crazy. And then their newest move takes the cake. And we've heard Mueller's investigation called a witch hunt. They've called it fake news, but now they're calling it a coup. Fox News' Jesse Waters, who is an interesting guy if you just look at a lot of things he's done and what he says. He said, the scary part is we may now have proof the investigation was weaponized to destroy the presidency for partisan political purposes and to disenfranchise millions of American voters. Now, if that's true, we have a coup on our hands in America. And when he was talking to Kellyanne Conway, the Chiron below read, a coup in America? That's just insanity, a coup in America.
Listen, you know what disenfranchises millions of American voters? Foreign agents acting for another country that get themselves involved in our election. That's disenfranchising, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the coup. I mean, the Mueller investigation, if you look at it, goes hand in hand with democracy. The Trump administration appointed Mueller. These guys, everybody involved in this, they're lifelong Republicans, or they're appointed by Republicans, so you can't say they're out to get Trump. But they don't like that he's been appointed now that he is finding things that they don't like, and they're trying to delegitimize the standing. To insinuate that this is not part of the Democratic process. It's basically attempting to destabilize democracy itself. I mean, it wasn't a coup when Richard Nixon stood down, and it's not a coup now that Trump is being investigated. Coups are bloody, violent. You can just see all these guys on Twitter saying, I've spoken to people who fought in coups. I've covered coups. This is anything but a coup. Honestly, if you see things like what happened most recently, the Arab Spring, Trump should be happy that this is how things are done in America. Coup. I mean, they'd be storming the palace and knocking down statues and stuff if this was a real coup in another country.
This is all just crazy talk from some crazy people. I mean, it's all referencing the two senior FBI officials, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who sent text messages to each other prior to the 2016 election that were derogatory or spoke negatively of a Trump presidency, saying things like, this guy can't be president or Hillary Clinton must win. Strzok became a top investigator for Mueller later on, but was removed as soon as Mueller became aware of the text, according to the New York Times. So the point would seem to be moot. However, the Republicans are naturally going to push to discredit Robert Mueller and his investigation because they want to get the whole thing thrown out.
But let's remember that you're an American citizen. You're allowed to have your own political beliefs. Where it comes into a shady ground is whether you can take your own political beliefs and put them aside to do your job. Now, I think Mueller did the exact right thing to get rid of these guys because it looks bad, even if it wasn't bad. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, and people are complaining about it. I mean, they're trying to say basically that this poisoned the entire process, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I would gather they may not be fans of Trump, but if you took a poll of the FBI, I bet you a lot of them are more right leaning than left leaning. So and if you take all this and then you add together last week this congressman that nobody's ever heard of, Matt Gaetz is probably to say his name. I've never heard of him before. He's from Florida. He called for Mueller's resignation. Said again, we are at risk of a coup d'état in this country if we allow an unaccountable person with no oversight to undermine the duly elected president of the United States. I mean, the statement just shows that he either is a partisan hack or he's wildly uninformed. I would willingly bet that he is both. I mean, this is all part of the process. You may not like it. I can understand if you're a big Trump fan, you probably don't like what's going on with Mueller, but everything is seemingly above board, and they haven't shown anything that's not how this democratic process works.
No, as you said, Jess, this is exactly what we want in our democracy, so it's best we let it continue to play out, regardless of whatever partisan beliefs we may have.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has said that he's not going to fire Mueller. Like he's getting said the same thing about Comey before he fired him, so who the hell knows what's really going to happen. But I swear, if he ends up firing Mueller, it's going to be like the Saturday Night Massacre 2.0. And if people aren't familiar with the Saturday Night Massacre, back when Nixon was in office, he ordered the firing of the independent special prosecutor Archibald Cox. There were people in office then that I can respect the way they handle things. I don't know if they would handle it the same way today. But Nixon's attorney general and deputy attorney general resigned because they wouldn't do it. They eventually found somebody to get rid of him, but this eventually led to a plurality of Americans supporting the impeachment of Nixon, and less than a year later, Nixon was out. So I think you really have to look at history if you're Trump and make sure you don't do something stupid that's just going to bite you in the butt even more, because we've heard it time and time again. Even if there wasn't something there to investigate, if you screw up during the investigation, that gets you just as well.
Right. And we say it time and time again about why it's important to learn from history. And the president seemingly doesn't ever do that. So go ahead. Try that approach. See what happens. If Nixon were alive, I think he'd probably give you some other advice.
He watches a lot of TV. Just unfortunately, none of that is the History Channel. So, take that for what it's worth. No, I'm a big reality TV fan. You know that, Kevin. I actually have another podcast that deals with reality TV. So it was interesting during the beginning of this presidency when Trump hired former apprentice candidate Omarosa Manigault. And then last week, the same Omarosa that I saw get fired on several seasons of The Apprentice either resigned or was fired from the White House. It's not particularly clear what happened.
Yeah, that was a little muddy. And of course, I am not the reality television show aficionado that you are, but even I was familiar with her from her time on The Apprentice. And I know that she was kind of known for being bright, but kind of loony, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. It's so strange that no one really can tell what really happened, although I guess you could say a lot of things in this White House. She was on Good Morning America. She was interviewed by Michael Strahan, and she claimed that she resigned after a conversation with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly in the Situation Room. Other reports had her confronting him at a White House Christmas party or trying to get into the White House residence, the Trump's residence, to ask President Trump about her dismissal. And then
can't you just see that? That's reality TV show right there.
I
you see her banging down the doors or trying to sneak past a Secret Service agent, like scratching, clawing her way at the door of the residence.
Well before any of us thought Trump might run for president, she was the person making my stomach turn as she would call him Mr. Trump while talking to him. Oh, Mr. Trump, call him Donald, So it's just really interesting to see, where the truth lies. The Secret Service actually came out and said, no, they did not physically escort her out of the White House. They had nothing to do with her firing because there were stories about that coming out. Although a source with knowledge of the situation previously said that she was not expected back in the White House grounds, even though she's still technically working there into January. So, if you still work there for another 3 weeks or so, but you're not going to be on White House property, there's something wacky going on there.
Unless, of course, she takes a page out of former Red Sox and Met manager Bobby Valentine's playbook, where she dons a fake mustache and pair of glasses and tries to walk through the doors that way. I don't know.
Omarosa? I don't know who Omarosa is. Oh, man. Trump tweeted out just a very simple tweet saying, "Thank you, Omarosa, for your service. I wish you continued success." People were kind of getting on him that it wasn't much of a goodbye, but I would argue that it's a better tweet goodbye than most people who encounter Trump get. So good for her, I guess. And people want to know again, why is she gone? Once again, people aren't too sure. I mean, reports coming in that she had a big title, had a big salary, but her job responsibilities were kind of undefined. No one knew what she did. I remember watching and seeing her sitting in on some of Spicy's early pressers back in the early days when things seemed so bad we didn't know they could get even worse.
Well, I can tell you what her job title would have appeared to be. That would be token minority in the lily white Trump administration.
Yeah, and she's going to use that in part of her argument too. She said that Kelly's style of leading was militaristic, and so she stood out because she was the only African American woman at the table, which I can kind of see that to a certain degree. But I mean, people have been trying to get rid of her reportedly since Reince Priebus was still in office, and again, that seems like a lifetime ago. That was 4 or 5 months ago.
You mentioned Reince Priebus. Did you see? It reminded me. Did you see Saturday Night Live this week?
Oh, I haven't recorded it. I can't believe I haven't watched it yet. I don't know. I know there's a skit, but tell me about it, please.
Well, yeah, not to spoil it too much, or for any of our listeners that haven't seen it yet, but just keep in mind the tree of shame, and Reince Priebus may have an ornament on said tree of shame.
Well, I'll probably watch it right after this podcast because it's just been sitting there. And usually, I don't know if I stick with the entire Saturday Night Live. Depends on who the host is. But I always watch that opening episode or that opening skit, hoping it's something to do with the Trump administration or something in current events.
Well, this one did not disappoint. I don't watch it every week either, but I was glad I tuned in this Saturday.
Good. So, what's next for Omarosa? Well, it seems pretty obvious from her appearance at Good Morning America that she's ready to sell herself and her story in a tell-all book that'll be coming to a bookstore near you or an Amazon distribution facility or however people get their books these days. Her quote on Good Morning America, I think, says it all. And it's a little long, so I'll go through it really quickly, and bear with me if I don't get it all. There were a lot of things that I observed during the last year that I was unhappy with, that I was very uncomfortable with. Things that I observed, that I heard, that I listened to. I have seen things that have made me uncomfortable, that have made me upset, that have affected me deeply and emotionally, that have affected my community and the people and my people. And when I can tell my story, it's a profound story that the world will want to hear.
That's for the low price of $29.99.
Yeah, that's a good trailer for her book. I have such a great story to tell you, but I can't tell you now. You have to, pay for my services. Which, maybe she learned something on The Apprentice. Maybe that she'll make her buck that way. Guess what? I won't buy her book, but I'll read the review and I'll skim it at the bookstore or something. Are there Barnes and Nobles around anymore? I haven't been to a bookstore in forever. Sorry, Amazon.
Yes, they do still exist. I frequent it somewhat regularly.
Borders is gone though, right?
Borders is gone.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Amazon has just taken over my life. I bought cat food on there the other day. I bought tissues, toilet paper. Why do I have to go to the store? Just get it all delivered to me. It's free 2-day shipping, Kevin.
I don't know. Some of us prefer to still do things, the old-fashioned way.
But I'm getting old. I go to the store and then I forget what I went there for. And then I come home and I'm like, oh, Newman, I just didn't get it. I also want to talk about something, Kevin. We haven't talked about this guy in quite a while. I thought maybe we're done with him for the moment, but no, he's popped back up. Our old friend Neil Gorsuch, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Trump is again pissed off for the media this time. He's pissed off for the Washington Post. They ran a story on Tuesday alleging that he considered pulling his nomination of Gorsuch when Gorsuch privately criticized Trump's attacks on the judiciary. If you remember back then, he was just pissed off at a lot of people blocking his travel bans and things like that. So this morning, Trump tweeted out a story in the Washington Post that I was close to rescinding my nomination of Justice Gorsuch prior to confirmation. It's fake news. I've never even wavered, and I'm proud to have him and have the job he is doing as Justice in the U.S. Supreme Court. Unnamed sources don't exist, even though there are 11 of these unnamed sources, and the Washington Post is standing by their story, and good for them.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't accuse Merrick Garland of spreading that.
Yeah, how dare he? He's just another Obama puppet. And by the way, it's not like Trump gets annoyed at people and wants to fire them. Just ask James Comey. Just ask Jeff Sessions, who we swear he wanted to get rid of a few times because he wouldn't do his bidding on the Russia probe. I remember it was just so mind-boggling that Trump was complaining about judges during Gorsuch's confirmation process, where he was asked about it, and he did rightly say it was disheartening and demoralizing. But you can never disagree with Trump. You got to be a good little soldier. You got to do what he does. You got to follow the party line.
Yes, fighting for his sensational brand of idiocy.
But I will give it up for Garland for during those hearings, saying that it was BS. Basically, I know you want the president's support when he nominated you to, a pretty sweet gig if you ask me. I guess we haven't had much to complain about Garland quite yet, though we haven't had any gigantic things come before the Supreme Court. So maybe we'll see. But hey, remember, Chief Justice Roberts voted in favor of the Obamacare stuff. So you never know what these guys might do. Sometimes they do put what's right above their own personal beliefs, and I guess that's why they're supposed to be there. There are a couple of things I want to go over here quick at the end, Kev. We didn't have this on the rundown, so I apologize, but figured, these are things we got to bring up, and these are stories we've all heard. Reportedly, officials at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are under orders by the Trump administration to stop using certain words in their official documents. On the list are diversity, fetus, transgender, vulnerable, entitlement, science-based, and evidence-based. Why would you want to use evidence-based, when you're doing things that have to do with disease control?
How I wish George Carlin were still alive.
It's just begging for it. Can we get a zombie Carlin up here?
Oh, the 7 words you cannot say. Yeah, that's these are shades of dictatorship. This is fascism, to shut down specific words that cannot be used by, first it's the CDC, next it's all American citizens. It's a horror story. This is a nightmare, but it is life. That's what we're living with in the Trump administration. So hopefully, something positive comes of this. I don't know what that will be, but I sure can hope.
Yeah, I mean, they would say, for example, instead of saying evidence-based or science-based, you might say something like, the CDC bases its recommendations on science in consideration with community standards and wishes. It's like trying to get around saying those naughty words that you don't want people to hear. It's so stupid. And people at the CDC are reporting this. They think it's nuts. Although over the weekend, the director of the CDC, Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, discussed this and said, there are no banned words. What a surprise to come out with this now. And some people are saying that, it wasn't meant to be a ban, just like, a suggestion not to use these words because they want to get the Republican approval of the 2019 budget. But man, if you have to make these kind of changes to get the approval of some wacky people, it's just not what you do. I mean, there are certain things I want in my documents if necessary, and if something's fact-based or evidence-based or science-based, say so. That helps promote your cause.
Yepper.
So, and the last couple of things I want to talk about really right here are just, it's been really quickly a bad week for Trump nominees. The Senate blocked Trump's nominee to head the Export-Import Bank. That was former Representative Scott Garrett.
Art Vandelay.
Yes. You want to be my latex salesman?
I'm an importer-exporter.
Toothpicks, I believe, is what I export. But this guy, Scott Garrett, when he was a congressman, he tried to shut down the Export-Import Bank, and now he wants to run it. It's almost as crazy as putting a guy who hates the EPA in charge of the EPA.
No, wait, we've already done that.
They've already done that. Yeah. So good on having like a bipartisan move to get this doofus out of there. I mean, I don't feel bad for this guy. I can't believe you would take the nomination for this job when you know you've done this in your past. Oh, you don't think it's going to come up at all? You don't think you're going to look like an idiot? If I was saying, I don't know, if I was saying I hated the FBI and then I decided to get a job at the FBI, I don't know, maybe I would think otherwise, but I don't know. And then the second one I want to bring up is Matthew Peterson. He was one of Trump's district attorney nominees. He withdrew his nomination. This follows last week. I think a lot of people probably saw this. It became kind of viral. It was a pretty embarrassing confirmation hearing where he struggled to answer basic legal questions. I mean, they didn't seem basic to me, but I've seen lawyers on Twitter who are like, it's like asking you, what letter comes after A? It's that kind of simple. And I don't know if I feel bad for this guy or not. I mean, I haven't seen anything bad about him other than maybe he was unqualified, but he kind of became a laughingstock through this viral video. I don't know.
Well, that's exactly what's bad. Being unqualified. Why would we want unqualified individuals being promoted to such positions of import?
I mean, there's a difference between like faking it till you make it at like one of our jobs or something. Like, you can do that, but when you have to go before a Senate committee and be grilled, sometimes for hours or days on whether you're qualified, and you're not, you can't just yada 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 your way through that. They're gonna find out it's not gonna be good. So why subject yourself to such embarrassment? I don't know. Maybe they just think they are qualified. I don't know. I'll tell you when someone nominates me for something. But I agree with you. It's good that we're seeing people who are unqualified kept out of important jobs. I mean, that's something we have to do. I think there's some people who've already been approved that might fall in that category too. But it's time for a change, and I'm glad that's coming down on both sides. I mean, because the guy who grilled Peterson was it Kennedy? Was it Senator Kennedy, I believe, from Louisiana? This is the same guy who referenced Lindsay Lohan by calling her Lindsay Lohan in a Senate hearing, which that kind of bothers me too. But heck, parties shouldn't matter when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Get it right. That's all that matters.
Get it right. All right, we're going to turn on over to you, Kev. What do you got us for Kevin's Corner this week?
Well, Jesse, we mentioned that a number of Republican lawmakers are describing the Mueller investigation into any Russian collusion on the part of the Trump administration as a potential coup. While this allegation will most likely prove fruitless, the real hijacking of America is taking place a mile and a half up Pennsylvania Avenue at the U.S. Capitol. The current tax bill, when looking at specifics, would seem to favor the wealthy, despite claims that it is a tax cut for the middle class. Small cuts for the average Americans on the front end, with an expiration date of 2025, while corporate tax cuts are made permanent, reeks of political payola. Having members of Congress with the gall to openly champion this bill as a gift to big money campaign contributors is a reminder that the real threat to our democracy does not originate in religious extremism, rather in failed attempts at campaign finance reform. Although this bill is likely to pass and will certainly be signed by a president eager for a legislative victory, we must remember that ours, in the immortal words of Lincoln, is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We must take back control of the ship. To the members of the 115th Congress, be advised, 2018 is nigh.
Nicely said. And God, I can't believe it's the 115th Congress already. I think I started working like in the 108th Congress when I was there. Man, time flies by. So, well, before we go, I want to wish again Happy Hanukkah to all our Jewish listeners, Merry Christmas to all of our Christian friends, and a happy Kwanzaa to anybody who may celebrate that coming up. That's next week as well. I think it's next Tuesday or so. My calendar tells me everything. Thank you for my calendar. So basically, what I want to say to everybody is it's been a fantastic year, and I don't know if we're going to do another episode this year. Next week is going to be really crazy with all the holiday stuff coming up, and with Congress going into recess. We don't know what's going to be out there. So if we don't come back for another episode this year, I want to tell you, Kevin, I want to tell all of our listeners that this has been it's been a horrible year for a lot of things, but podcast-wise, it's been an absolute pleasure to do the show with you, to talk to all of our wonderful listeners every week, and it's good that life handed us some lemons this year, and we made some lemonade. I look forward to doing this into 2018 with you as well.
Well, right back at you, Jesse. It's been fun. It's been a joy to finally get this podcast off the ground. And as you said, while it was a negative event, perhaps that got us, spurred us into action, I'm happy to be able to report out to our listeners every week, and looking forward to another year of reporting on what's going on in Washington and keeping our listeners informed. That's the most important thing to be as an American citizen. So, keep on listening. And if you haven't started, go ahead and start. And we love to hear from you.
Yeah, you can find a way to contact us at our website at grabthembythepod.com. Lots of great stuff there. And until next episode or until next year, depending on what happens, Kevin, it's been fun.
Later.